It's such a pleasure to be here this evening. So just want to say thank you to all of the students that have tuned in. So my name's May, and as Andrea said, I work for the Royal Parks. So it's a fantastic job for me, particularly because I live in a flat in London that has no garden. So for me, working in a park is really special. I get to spend lots of time outdoors. And we manage around 5,000 acres of green space. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Mission Invertebrate, which is a funded project, externally funded project that I work on, which is all about exciting people of all ages about the amazing world of invertebrates. And of course, invertebrates are animals without a backbone, so things like crustaceans, so crabs and shrimps and things that live under the sea, and also insects and mollusks, and so they make up a huge amount of species and animals on this planet, and they are really important for ecosystems and for us to live. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I do in my job and how I got to where I am today. I am also just want to say that, you know, I'm kind of relatively new in my career as well, so I'm not too, you know, A levels and all that kind of stuff is relatively fresh in my mind. So I will just talk a little bit about the experience that I've had since going to university, and hopefully you know, talk about where I'd like to go in the future as well. So I'll just begin sharing my screen. The presentation that I've got prepared for you is just a lot of photographs, just to give you an idea of what I do. So I'm just going to share that with you now. Great, can everyone see that? I hope so. Great. I can't actually see I can't see your face, Bronwyn, but I'm hoping that someone's putting their thumbs up, and do let me know if I'm running over time as well. So this is a little bit of an introduction about what I do. So I thought I'd just give a little bit of background. So you can see that a lot of the photographs are outdoors. So I am quite a fidgety person. I love being on my feet and being active. So if you want to get into conservation, then and you're someone that can't sit still and loves being outdoors, then this is definitely a potential career for you, because I always love being outside, rain or shine. So it's a really fantastic opportunity to work at the Royal Parks or any green spaces around the UK. So the first image on the top left hand side is the allotment. So we have two allotments in the Royal Parks, and this is part of my job. Is I get to look after the allotments. So we have a fantastic relationship with a charity called Sustain, which is all about sustainable farming. So I work alongside Carolyn, who's the allotment manager, and we do lots of food growing, and volunteers who are any members of the public can sign up, and they come along to the allotment to help learn, to help grow food and learn about how to do that. So it's a really awesome part of my job, because I get to see how fruit and veg is grown, and also learn about how to create healthy soils. And healthy soils are really important to enable us to have food. And with climate change happening at the moment, it's a really top priority for us to have healthy soils. And one of the most important invertebrates for that is earthworms. So earthworms are recyclers, and they basically poop out the healthy soil that we use to grow our fruit and veg. So they're very important. The middle photo is a screenshot of me doing a YouTube video. So as you're probably all aware, things have been a little bit different over the last year. We haven't been able to do engagement in person. So lots of my role now in the conservation sector is engaging people. So doing guided walks around the parks, delivering talks, so to families perhaps that want to come along and learn about invertebrates. And the really important thing is that when we do in-person sessions, they're always free. People come along and they get their hands dirty. So they get to kind of have a look in the hedgerows and the shrubs, in the allotments, they get to, you know, touch and feel the soil. So it's a really active job, and that's why I really like it. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do things in person, obviously, during the lockdown. So we had to adapt. So we decided to start doing some virtual online talks, and one of those was how to build a bug hotel. So that's me showing people that you can just use lots of various materials that you can find lying around in the parks, and creating little nooks and crannies for the invertebrates to hide in. So that's been a really interesting part of conservation, is actually how can we talk to people about protecting the environment, and maintaining that curiosity of the outdoors, even though we're kind of stuck indoors. It's been difficult. The photograph on the far right hand side, you can probably see two people digging. So another aspect of my role in conservation and outdoor education is the amazing work that volunteers do, giving up their time to help us achieve our goals. And one of those goals is to add more hedgerows and more plants and flowers into our parks. So this was a fantastic day last winter where volunteers planted up a really big hedgerow of lots of fantastic shrubs like holly, blackthorn, hawthorn. So these are all plants that are really good for pollinators, and not only are they great for insects because they produce flowers so that insects can come and pollinate them, but they're also great for things like birds that might nest in them, and hedgehogs as well that might nest in there too. So we do actually have hedgehogs in Regent's Park in the northern part of London, and it's fantastic. One of the things that I did a couple of weeks ago was a night shift. So from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. walking around the park at night time using thermal imaging cameras to find hedgehogs, and it was such a brilliant opportunity. So again, if you get into the conservation sector, depending on what animals you're looking at or plants you're looking at, sometimes you might be out in the middle of the night, which I find very fun. So the photograph that I've included there is, if any of you might already know, but there's a picture of a stag beetle. And so I wanted to show this image of a stag beetle on someone's hand, because really this is kind of the essence of getting into conservation and engagement, because we want to bring the invertebrates up close to people, because often it's quite common, you know, you're walking maybe through a park, or you're walking to the shops, and it's very easy to not look around. And actually, once you stop and do look around and start looking, you find loads of little mini beasts and things like that. And actually, opening up the world of invertebrates often is people can completely change their mindset and think, oh my goodness, now I realize how much of a haven these green spaces are for all of these invertebrates that we might not otherwise spot. So that's a stag beetle, and stag beetles are really interesting because the female lays her eggs inside dead wood. So the grubs, the larvae, which look a bit like big white caterpillars, they actually eat dead wood, which is a bit of an acquired taste. And the larvae actually can spend up to 7 years as a grub inside the dead wood before they undergo metamorphosis and turn into the adult stag beetle that we can see there. So part of my job is not only engaging people and telling people about the invertebrates, but also doing habitat enhancement to make sure that these invertebrates can thrive in our green spaces. And that's exactly where volunteers come in to help. So another thing that I love about being in the conservation sector is that you get to work with so many different people. And particularly when working with volunteers, they come from all over the world, and they have very different interests. So sometimes they might be, say, work in the finance sector, but they want to come along and help us. And of course, being outdoors can improve our mental health and well-being. So lots of people come along, and it's just such a great opportunity to have fantastic and fun conversation and meet new people. So a lot of the time, we are working outdoors and working with plants and people, but sometimes we work with artists as well. So again, I'm really lucky because my job is really varied. And so this was a mural that was completed by a street artist called ATM and another artist called Karen Francesca, who does lots of work around and highlighting the amazing invertebrates and wildlife that we have in London. And all of the species, animals that you can see on this mural, they're all found in the Regent's Park in North London. So it's a really, really engaging and fun way of telling people, hey, look, all of these things are here. And sometimes you do have to look quite carefully to find them, but often they are just beneath our nose. This was painted in a playground called the Gloucester Gate Playground in the northeastern part of the park, and I think it's so colourful and it's brilliant. So it's really fun to work with artists, because that's a really creative and fun way of engaging with people. Sometimes, with engaging people with science, communication is really important. So there's lots of things that you can read about, there's lots of talks that you can go to, but sometimes it's better to learn through images. And this, for me, I think is a really great way to learn, because you can see all of the different colours, different flowers, and immediately you can see, wow, actually the invertebrate world is very, very diverse. There is a bird, the eagle-eyed of you might have spotted a bird in the lake, which isn't an invertebrate, it is a vertebrate like us, so they have a backbone. But of course, everything in the ecosystem is all connected. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I got into conservation. So I, for A-levels, I did, and to be honest with you, I chose my A-levels very, very late. I just wasn't sure what to do. I found it really hard to pick only, I only chose 3. So I did psychology, history, and biology. I did do chemistry, but I got an E, so I dropped that because I decided I probably wasn't going to do very well. So I did biology at university. So I came to university in London. And actually, what I think is really, really important to tell you guys today is that lots of the people that I work with, some of them didn't do biology degrees. I have my colleague who works as a volunteer officer, who actually did English literature for her degree, but it just so happens that she loves being outdoors and she has a job working in conservation. So although it is helpful to do a biology or an environmental science degree at university, it doesn't always determine what you go into later. Often with jobs now, when I apply, as long as there are things that you can show that you're passionate about and that you have perhaps a university degree, then or an equivalent level, then it's absolutely fine. You don't necessarily have to have a biology degree. I just chose that because that's something that I'm really passionate about. A real challenge, because when you volunteer, you do it for free, and sometimes you get your expenses covered. So for example, your lunch or travel, but you're not being paid, and it's a really, really difficult thing, because often you're giving up your time for free. And if you're not in a position, particularly at university, when you've got to try and work to get money as a student, it's really hard to find the time to volunteer. So when I was at university, I began to volunteer at the Natural History Museum in South Kensington. So that's a photo of me in the orange fleece, and those are tropical butterflies that you can find in Southeast Asia, and they are dead. So as you can see, I was working with specimens in the collection, and some of those butterflies will be well over 150 years old. I think that collections are really important, because we can see the wealth of butterflies that we had, maybe 50 or 100 years ago, and compare that to now, unfortunately, where lots of butterflies have gone extinct in the UK. So we can see that we are losing lots of our biodiversity in this climate crisis. So it's really important that we use these collections to inform us now, so that we can make sure that we don't lose any more. So that was that was me volunteering in museums. And then in the far right photograph, that's me in my waders in a pond. So I volunteered for in Walthamstow. It's working for the council. So I got into a little bit more of the ecological side of things. So I was looking at what invertebrates, aquatic invertebrates, you can find in the water. So maybe things like dragonfly larvae that are ferocious predators in the water, and seeing how many we found, and we compared that to a similar pond on the other side of the road that has experienced littering, maybe there aren't any plants in it, and it was a lot more barren. So the council just wanted to do a survey to see the difference between the pond that has lots of planting and a fence around it, so people can still look into it, but they can't potentially drop litter, for example, so that they could then maybe change the other pond across the road that was experiencing lots of litter and didn't have as much wildlife in it. So there's lots of different ways that you can go into conservation, but for me, I love talking and communicating with people and telling them about the amazing world of invertebrates. So I always wanted to do a job working specifically in conservation engagement. So that's when I moved away from museums and doing ecological surveys to actually getting a job in a museum in southeast London, and I worked as a learning officer. So I was delivering school sessions, so school children would come and visit, normally primary school would come and visit, and we'd show them around the gardens, and we would do things like pond dipping and mini beast hunting and planting as well, which was really, really good fun. And after that, I got a job working for a charity called Butterfly Conservation, which is a UK-wide charity dedicated to protecting butterflies and moths around the UK, and I was fortunate enough to actually be interviewed on ITV and on BBC News as well, which was really nerve-wracking because it was live TV, but it was a really great opportunity for me to talk about how London is actually a fantastic place for wildlife, and that's because lots of us, if you're fortunate enough to have a garden, there's lots of green space, lots of parks, and people really care about biodiversity here. So you'll notice that lots of our green spaces now, councils are making a real effort to have areas that are left for wildlife. So we actually have really good populations of butterflies and moths, and it's also warm in London, so the insects particularly really like that. And just to mention as well, when I was at university, I mentioned that I particularly was into the human immune system, and I was looking at HIV. And when I was volunteering at the Natural History Museum, I was also volunteering for a fantastic charity called Positive East, which is all about talking to people about safe sex. And for me, it was a real crossroads because I was really passionate about sexual health, but I was also really passionate about insects and global warming and talking to people about how important biodiversity is. So it was a real difficulty for me because I wasn't sure which direction to go in. I chose to go into the conservation sector just purely because it was I applied to lots of jobs and they were the first people to get back to me and say that I was successful in the job. And I really hope that I'll get back into the sexual health charity sector as well. But you might be passionate about numerous things, and it can always be a real challenge in life to decide how you want to spend your time, particularly because working, you spend a lot of your time working and sometimes more time with your colleagues at work than you do with maybe friends and family. So for me, it's all about having a job that you love, and that's I think sometimes a really important factor. So also conservation can take you all over the world. So I've stayed in London, but I have some of my friends that I did my university degree with who are going on to do masters or PhDs and go into academia. That world wasn't for me. I'm terrible at writing and concentrating on long dissertations. It's just not for me. But if you do choose to go into conservation, then also you can be at the forefront of scientific breakthroughs and helping to preserve lots of these amazing habitats that we have around the world. So I had one friend who went to Brazil, for example, and was looking at specific frog species, and another friend that went to Malaysia to do that as well. One of my trips was to Costa Rica. So at university, I went to a few different places, and one of those places was Costa Rica, and we were looking at the amazing biodiversity that we have there. So it's a really for me, conservation can take you all over the world. So I just wanted to add that it's another reason why it's such an amazing role. And often if you do that with university, for example, or if you get sponsored by a company, then they pay for you to do it. So it's a really, really good opportunity, because otherwise I probably would have never been able to go. So I just again wanted to kind of full circle. So I talked a bit about what I did for A levels, and then at university I did biology and did some various volunteering work, and then got a job working in a museum, and now just a few jobs in between, and now I work for the Royal Parks, which is where I mentioned we have 5,000 acres of parks and green space across London. So you might be familiar with Regent's Park or Hyde Park, and then some of the bigger ones like Greenwich Park and Richmond Park. I predominantly work in Regent's Park now, and just a little bit about my job. You know, it's really varied. So sometimes, if you can see that big machinery, the big digger in the pond in Regent's Park, I work with contractors, and this particular contractor was digging up basically the muddy bottom of the lake, and we were putting plants to improve biodiversity. So lots of it is liaising with contractors who might do really, really big work for you. And then on the right hand side, we've got a photograph of an interpretation board. So looking at how can we communicate with the public. So we put in a bee bank, which is essentially kind of a mound of soil and sand that's south facing, and bees will fly over and they actually make holes in the ground, and they use them as nesting chambers to rear their larvae. It's really fascinating. So we fenced that off to make sure that people didn't stand and trample over it. But when you fence something off, it's really good to tell the public why you're doing that. And that's where the interpretation boards are really important, so that we can tell the public, you know, this is why we're doing this, and we hope that you'll be excited to find bees yourself here. And then we also do work within Mission Invertebrate, and myself, we do work with inspiring young children as well. So we do kind of free family activity days. So that's on the bottom right hand side, my colleague, and a fantastic one of the children that was just fantastic and knew so much about the invertebrates, and was really, really excited to find lots of things on that summer's day. And then again, the bottom left hand side is volunteer work. So it's really, again, opportunity to speak to new people and to tell them all about the importance of biodiversity. And I just wanted to, hang on, let me go to the next slide. Just a couple of tips on getting into the conservation sector, and Bronwyn, please do let me know if I'm running over time. So I just had just a couple of tips of getting into the sector, and again, this is just my experience, so other people in the conservation sector might say stuff slightly different, but as I said, having volunteering experience really helps. So I think that, you know, if you have a passion, that's really the most important thing, and having volunteering experience can really help. And even if it's just perhaps you know, if it's something that you're passionate about, just a couple of afternoons that you're able to volunteer somewhere, then it's a really, really great thing to have on your CV. And as I said, you know, it can be really difficult to get that voluntary experience because you're not always paid, but again, it's something that having volunteering experience. For example, when I volunteered at the museum, I really enjoyed it, but actually sometimes, you know, I have done other volunteering opportunities and thought, oh, do you know what, I'm not enjoying this at all. And it's a really good way of knowing what you like and what you don't like, and perhaps what you'd like to do as a job. Another good application is LinkedIn. Some of you might have heard of this or maybe be on it already. So I think LinkedIn is a really good, you can create a profile and, you know, you have a little bit of your biog about what you're interested in. And for me, I use LinkedIn quite a lot, because if there's someone that has kind of like my dream job, so maybe someone who's, you know, traveling the world and is a BBC presenter, and I can go onto their LinkedIn profile and look at the experience that they've had. And I find that really useful, because I can say, oh, okay, well, if I want to do that, then I'll try and get that similar experience. It's also really good if you're going in for an interview, because you can have a look at who's going to interview you and what kind of background and experience they have. And it's also a great way of connecting with people that might be in a similar industry to you. And the other thing is that if you are going into a career, then there's so much help online. So, for example, getting into conservation and learning about some of the invertebrates. I by no means know everything that there is to know about invertebrates, because there are so many different types. But what's really good is if you're able to kind of expand your knowledge, and then you feel more confident because you've done a bit of research yourself. And also, if you are going for an interview, it looks really good because it shows that you're really passionate and you've spent time researching some particular topics. And also, don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. So particularly in the conservation sector, I can't speak for other sectors, but in general, we're all you know, really happy to respond to people's emails, or you know, if you ever want to come and volunteer or do work experience at the Royal Parks, which there is an opportunity to do that, then you know, ask questions. I think that it's really difficult to feel confident asking questions, because I know I can be worried that my question might sound silly, but it's really great to ask people, you know, actually, how did you get into this, or how did you get the job that you're doing? And often you'll find that people love talking about what they do, so asking questions is a really important one. And then when Andrea asked me to talk a few things to talk about, one of them was the advice that I wish I was given, and particularly in sixth form. And my main bit of advice, which I wish someone had told me, was that exam results do not define you. So I've told you that I got an E in chemistry, and you know, even with my biology exams, which is something I was so passionate about and knew I wanted to do it, I actually applied to Leeds University. I didn't get in because I didn't get the right A-level results, so I had to take a gap year and reapply. I got rejected a second time. So even when you're passionate about something, it's actually really hard to do exams, and so, you know, I think it's really easy to be to get really down about exam results, and particularly in school, you know, you're often graded, and obviously they are, you know, exams are really important, you want to do well, but you know, even if you don't quite get the right A-level results, you know, like I didn't at all, and I had to reapply, I had to retake exams. But actually, if I hadn't have had that year out, I would have never got the, you know, I just worked in retail, but I loved it, and I was able to volunteer at the Natural History Museum. So lots of different opportunities arose that would have never happened otherwise. So I think that if you do get an exam result that you're not particularly happy with, then don't worry, because exams are really, really hard, and particularly with A-levels, I think they're really challenging. Not all of you might be doing A-levels, perhaps IB or you know, other qualifications, but you know, it's the passion that you have that I think is really important, and not necessarily just the exam results. So I just wanted to end on that, because you know, as someone, you know, I love my job now and I'm really happy in what I do, but back when I was doing my A-levels and got rejected from university and everything like that, I felt like it was just the end of the world. But just to say that there is always light at the end of the tunnel, even if perhaps you don't get the grades that you want to, and particularly because I know that you've all had such a challenging time with school, obviously with COVID, so just to be, you know, easy on yourself. And I really look forward to hearing your questions. That's the end of my slideshow. I'm aware it's kind of gone 5:05. So I'll end there. And look forward to answering any of your questions if you have them. And thank you for listening.